Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call the West Bloomfield Board of Education special meeting on March 9th, 2022 to order. We welcome you here and at home this evening. The second round interview is being live streamed and a recording will be available this evening on our website on the Superintendent search page. Okay. On behalf of the Board of Education of West Bloomfield School District, I'd like to welcome Dania Bazzi back for the second round interview. Dr. Bazzi is Superintendent of Ferndale Public Schools. I'd like to take just a moment to describe our format this evening. The interview may take up to 80 minutes. It will begin with a presentation on the topic provided by the board. Following your presentation, there will be 16 questions. Toward the end of the interview, time permitting, we will give you an opportunity to ask questions of the board and make closing remarks. We will indicate if time is becoming an issue and there is a need to pick up the pace of your responses. Audience feedback may be submitted on the form provided for this purpose. They're over on the table by our water and coffee stand. Although the task of choosing our next superintendent is the responsibility of the Board of Education, as the elected representatives of our community, we value and consider the input of our stakeholders in the process. Dr. Bazzi, you may begin with your presentation on the following topic, and the board's going to go and sit over in that area with our, just so you know, we're going to get up and we're going to walk over there. If you were to be our next superintendent, how would we see our portrait of a graduate alive and thriving in our classrooms and schools under your leadership? How have these core competency skills and dispositions been evident in your personal leadership experience? So board members, I'm going to ask you to please gather if you need anything. And let's go into the audience so that Dr. Bazzi can address everyone all at once.
That's going to work with the cameras. I didn't reset that. She's going to have to turn around and face the audience and us. It's going to get the back of her head. See, this camera would get her forearm if she presents this way. Those two cameras.
Oh.
If she's standing there and presenting.
It's old school. I like it.
Can she sit here?
She's going to
It's the same.
Oh, that's
All right, Dr. Bazzi, you can have my spot.
I'm not moving it.
It's for the cameras.
It's because of the cameras.
We don't want the back of your head.
No.
It's something logistically.
They took the lens out of his last name. Wait, he was legally blind in that eye before. He's 26 years old. And he gets that.
So far, they don't.
Getting mad about it.
I'm a leader. They gotta work my chance.
They moved to second surgery because he's seen two different things.
So because the mic, so I will sit down to make sure, yep.
You good with that?
I'm fine with that, yes.
We can grab it whenever you need it. Right?
Yeah, and the link is in the notes of the slide that it's embedded in.
Perfect. Okay, so once it comes up, I'll just go up and click it then.
Yeah, it's like, I think the fifth slide maybe, yep.
Got it. Awesome.
You got it. All right, I will begin. First, thank you, members of the Board of Education and community, for having me for round two. I'm really excited. I spent the majority of the day with stakeholders, and I really enjoyed it, but I'll speak to that more later. Portrait of a graduate. This really tells a complete story of West Bloomfield School District and doing the research of what that means to your district. I'm going to share some parallels from my experience in Ferndale and how we implement our own Cs, and we'll get to that. And then what I hope to see in terms within the classroom, within the community, how we see those 4 Cs alive as well, and continue the great work that you've done and honor that, but also continue the work moving forward. So it's really important when you think about the 4 Cs that these are essential skills, right? They're often referred to as soft skills, but we discussed this a little bit during the first round, that these are essential for the workplace, for life, for the global economy, that we have these skills. Another thing is you really can't get to academic rigor without relationships. It's really hard for people to learn or work with people that they don't like or respect or feel valued from. So we have to have those relational pieces. Also, one thing in looking at the 4 C's is it's really progressive in terms of forward thinking, that we really have to educate students for their future and not our past. So if you look at this, it has basically the Ferndale, we use 6 C's and you have 4 C's, but you can see they're almost identical. They're in different compartments. The one difference you see with ours is it includes character education, but again, I think the essence is identical to one another. So it's really, really great to see. But to get to the 4 C's, really get to them in depth, we have to shift our thinking. And we have to look from changing our model from a reactionary model to a model based on relationships. So in looking at this, and I'm sorry, I'm going to turn around just for a second, we really have to move from a traditional model to a relationship model. So if you look at it, we look at rewards and punishments, and a lot of times we see that. If you do this right, you get this, right? And we look at punishment. If you do this wrong, this is your punishment. And we really need to really think about how we look at punishment versus consequences, and then move that model to where we get to connection and contribution, and then to character, right? We want students to make the right decision because that's their character. That's what they do. So we have to really take the time and go backwards design this in order to fully implement the 4 C's, 6 C's, however many C's. But to get to that education, we really have to put in the placeholders in the classroom, in teaching and learning, to make those things happen. So again, a lot of the times I remember my mother saying, I would say, why do we have to do this? And what did she say? Because I said so. That's really hard to understand as a child when we say, you must do these because I said so, where we have to take the time to understand the why and then have them commit to those values. We commit to those as a school community, and we all adhere to them moving forward. Again, to get to the 6 C's or 4 C's, we have to have an umbrella of support that includes restorative practices, that includes cultures of thinking, that includes social emotional learning. So obviously I have a lot of things up there in terms of specific strategies we use in Ferndale to adhere to accomplishing our 6 C's. And I don't have enough time to go through all of them, but we're going to take a little bit deeper dive into our SEL curriculum. So this is, cue the video, please. And it's very short, I promise. But it'll give you a picture of what social emotional curriculum looks like in the classroom at Ferndale Public Schools. So if you go to YouTube and just type in Ferndale SEL, it'll be the first video that pops up. Oh, okay. Well, I was going to ask that to be funny, but I was going to refrain from it. It's okay, no pressure. No.
Only on live TV.
Now look everyone watching you right now.
You gotta get connected to the correct internet, that's not your Twitter.
Oh, yeah, no worries. We'll keep going. If we can come back to it, we will. If not, we'll. Yeah, yeah. No worries. All right. So specifically, our social emotional curriculum has 5 competencies that we implement within the classroom. They're focused on self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. Specifically, if you take a deeper dive into those, and again, you have a paper copy, so you're able to see this a little bit better. But again, self-awareness deals with things like executive functioning skills, feelings, gratefulness, gratitude, motivation. Self-management is about our self-control, self-regulation. And when we think about those things, we think those are easy, but then we think of, an elementary student who has a tantrum, right? Or a high school student who decides to harm students while in a building, right? Those self-regulation skills are missing from some of our students, and we really want to help them deal with certain emotions that they have throughout a school day or in life in general. We talk about social awareness as it relates to diversity, differences, tattling versus telling, what bullying is versus what it isn't. We hear a lot of times very quickly that's bullying, where in some cases it is, but in some case, it isn't. It's age, behavior that obviously we need to help with. Relationship skills, active listening, kindness, how to be a good listener. Again, things that we think are common sense, but we're starting to see those issues, especially post-pandemic, in terms of our social skills with our students. And then responsible decision-making, honesty, integrity, fairness. Again, these things should be common sense, but we see the world we live in. We see people be dishonest or lack ethics that we hold true to ourselves and we want to see in our students. So these skills, again, should be explicitly taught within the classroom setting. So here are some of this is our modules that we do at the elementary level, K-5. Again, the modules are listed above there. At the K-5 level, every single day there's a morning meeting that covers these skills, and throughout the school year we go through those modules. To take a little bit deeper dive into one of the modules, we'll look at the brain state. Here we teach our students the different parts of the brain and what that controls: our executive state, our emotional state, our survival state. Am I loved? Do I feel safe? And if you look at it, this is in our K2 building. Students are being able to assess where they're at in their brain state based on their age. So even at a young age, you can teach these skills explicitly, and then students are able to understand kind of where they're at on a particular day. At the secondary level, we have Impact Hour, and it's Impact Hour sounds nicer than Impact 30, but it's actually 30 minutes a day, 4 days a week, but Impact Hour sounds better. And again, at the secondary level, we tailor this to our students based on what they need. This curriculum is ever, evolving. We evaluate it each year and make adjustments based on the needs of our students. Sometimes students say we need test-taking strategies, so we create a module on that. But again, it stays true to also common vocabulary and common competencies that we do K-5, so that there's vertical alignment throughout the grade levels. So again, it focuses on the social emotional competencies, managing emotions. Here we get a little bit deeper into grades and managing workload and time. Again, this is daily, embedded, and the curriculum is ever evolving. So the question is why? Why do all this? What's the impact to students? Is there a benefit? Absolutely. There's a benefit for all of us who work within the educational setting, and of course for our students. Students with higher emotional intelligence have less anxiety, have less depression. That's in the research, it's clear. They're less aggressive and less likely to bully others. They're less likely to abuse drugs and alcohol. Then when you shift from the student level to the classroom level, the students are more actively engaged in their learning They demonstrate increased pro-social behavior. They have better relationships with teachers and staff, and ultimately they perform better academically, which is what we're trying to accomplish. So from a teacher standpoint, again, how does this help our teachers and staff? This is healthier relationships with our students, where students are doing better academically and socially, better classroom management, receive more support from their principals, and greater job satisfaction as there's less stress and less burnout. Oh, sorry. So, and then looking at leaders, same thing, have greater sensitivity and empathy for our staff and our students, are rated better in their evaluations, and create healthier school climates. So again, there's benefits at all levels for all intended parties. We all have to work interdependently with one another, and it's very important that we understand our emotional intelligence and how that interfaces with the school community. So now to West Bloomfield, right? I shared a little bit about what we do. The 4 C's have to be integrated into our teaching and learning in normal routines. It has to be a part of our daily practice. It is really, really important, though, that to understand 4 C's is not content, right? It's skills for gaining content. These skills allow us to gain content. So again, I had to make some assumptions. I tried to Google and investigate as much as I could. And even ask people that I know in West Bloomfield, about certain things. So I know this list is much more extensive, but this is what I was able to find. Obviously, you have an ambassador program that you're very proud of and does great work. You have STEAM pathways, and it's integrated within the classroom level. That's seen through numerous videos that are highlighted on your website. So the work is being done, and that is wonderful. Again, not understanding exactly what is and isn't done, these are some recommendations that I would have that I would hope we'd be able to integrate into the classroom setting. Of course, I would work with, the assistant sup of curriculum and instruction and their department and have those discussions in terms of what's taking place at the classroom level. So what does a 4 C's classroom look like? So if I walk into there, what does it look like? It's going to be student-centered. It's going to promote student choice and voice, so it's not one size fits all. The class does this. You don't have choice in terms of topic, delivery method, and things of this nature. It's going to focus on deeper learning, not breadth, rather depth, how far we go into subject areas. The learning that they do is going to be connected to their school and community, and the global world around them. And the students are going to be our creators, right? They're the ones who are going to create the content, not TikTok, but they're going to be creators in the classroom and share that with us. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are going to be celebrated in the classroom. And again, they're going to be the ones at the center of the learning. One thing I have up there is a thing that's in most classrooms at Ferndale, and it's very simple, much different than when I was at school, right? When I was at school, if you were late, everyone heard you were late, and you kind of had, you were really scolded for it. Again, at our doors, we say, are you running late? Stop, take a breath, knock once, and we'll be right there. We're glad you made it. Ultimately, we want students in the classroom. We want them to be on time, but there's a way to escalate and de-escalate particular situations. So specifically, what are some strategies to ensure that the 4 C's are alive and well within the classroom? One of the strategies is productive talk moves. This is ways that teachers can skillfully encourage their students to think deeply and articulate their reasoning and listen with purpose. Basically, it's going to have these stems that either students can ask of one another or the teachers can ask that really forces students thinking to go deeper. So, for example, I might say, I agree. Okay, well, why? I agree because X, Y, and Z, okay? Also, it's really important that we paraphrase because then we have an understanding of what that person said, and then when we repeat it back to them, they're able to tell us, yes, that's what I meant, or no, that's not what I meant, and they'll be able to clarify that. Another example is, can you say more about that? So somebody might say something and I want to go a little bit deeper. Again, students should be asking these questions of one another, and the teacher should be asking the students the same thing. The next strategy is the understanding map. And again, this allows us, questions that really make us think deeper. It makes us consider different viewpoints within the classroom so that it's not, just not all responses are homogeneous in nature. It allows us to reason with evidence, not just because I said so, but there's a reason for my thinking, and I'm able to articulate that as a student. We make connections by using these stems and these questions within the classroom. We uncover complexity that we might have not seen. And again, these all feed into being creative, to being a collaborator, to being a communicator, rather than always working independently. We're getting students' dialogue and student talk integrated into the classroom setting. This is something, again, we use in all of our morning meetings at the elementary. We ask that students tell us where they're at on their mood meter. So they might be surprised, happy. This gives us a little bit deeper meaning than saying, I feel I'm good, right? Because every time I ask my 5-year-old, how are you doing? I'm good. And that really doesn't tell me enough. So this mood meter allows me to know where my students are at when they come into the room and how to help move them from maybe, angry to content. But I have to know where they're at, and maybe that will give me a little bit of understanding of how they're coming into my classroom. And again, this shifts conversations from feelings to more specific examples, like instead of good, curious, and that allows us to meet the needs of our students. And again, developing this emotional intelligence helps our students deal with anger or things that might come up throughout the day so that they're able to manage their emotions. Another strategy that we like to use in the classroom is our see, think, wonder. If you see in that corner, there's an image, and it appears, again, these are my own assumptions, right? It appears to be someone walking, and again, how I interpret this is different. So every week we send this out to all staff and teachers, and during their impact class or their morning meeting, students are asked to see, think, and wonder about the image and make some thoughts about that. So I see it as somebody walking like on a gloomy day, walking home from work. And you might see something completely different, and it's good to have those conversations of what do we see, what do we think, and what do we wonder about that image. So we do that every week and have an image that we send out at the district level along with, the Monday pep message to staff. Another way to create students who embody the 4 C's is really getting students involved. I know you have a student board rep. I met her today during our session. She was fantastic. We have to continue to give opportunities like this to our students. They have to have advocacy within them, right? Because we're all here because we're public school educators and advocates. It's important that we give that same opportunities to our student. They should impact policy, they should impact equity within the district, and it's important for their voices to be heard. So again, if we change the experience and you change the brain, you impact the heart. Right? That's the only way to impact the heart. We have to change the experience. We can't continue to do the same thing when the needs of our students have evolved over time. And I'm glad to see the 4 C's highlighted and celebrated within the community, because that is certainly what our students need and what they deserve. So going back to this, again, now we'll align it to West Bloomfield. Now we can see that, again, to get to be a collaborator, there has to be connection, right? To get to be a contributor, we have to have a sense of community, okay? To be a critical thinker, we have to be problem solvers, right? And we have to go from a traditional model to a model based on community and relationship. which again, all the things that you have done with regards to this work are there. The foundation and the pathway is there. We have to continue the work. And it's hard because we all look at this and we say, yes, when we say it, who wants change? Everybody raises their hand. We want change, right? But then the question, who wants to change? Are we still raising our hand? And then the question becomes, who wants to lead the change? And then it's an empty room, okay? We are the leaders of our community. It is our job to lead them and to know that this is an ongoing path of discovery, that we have to take risks. We need to constantly challenge ourselves and do what's best for our students, and then we'll see the results of it. So in West Bloomfield, you are a portrait of a graduate, you are a communicator, you are a school family, you are a contributor, you are creative, you are committed, you are innovative, you are West Bloomfield. So I hope that the work will continue and will continue to be on that ongoing path of discovery. Oh, good, yep. Oh, so if we have time just for the video very quickly, it's literally 1 minute and 40 seconds, maybe 1 minute 50.
SEL stands for social emotional learning. We teach skills of how to get along, how to handle yourself when life doesn't go your way, how to manage stress, how to be organized. And when we do that, we have better academic success, we have more purpose and joy in our life, and we have more passion to do what we want to do. From early childhood to graduation, this is what you're going to get in Ferndale schools. Our teachers focus on building routines, teaching the words you want to use when you're trying to make a friend. And then we start to teach our children about the brain states when we move into our frontal lobe. And that's when we can be creative and problem solve.
Impact Hour is like a regular class, but it gets you to open up about your feelings, what happened in your day.
If you have a difficulty in something, they try to help you through it.
We have talks about practical life things.
You learn to treat the world with respect and treat others how you want to be treated.
Every day, children make a commitment, and it might be I commit to keeping my hands to myself. I commit to trying super hard in math. I commit to using kind words with my friend. They make that commitment at the beginning of the day, and at the end of the day, we reflect on it. We need to turn from a traditional model of schools to one of community and relationships. When we do that, academic success goes a long way.
Thank you for that. There's a lot of comparisons with our focus on relationships. That is very evident. So I think our first question, let me just get it reorganized. Start with Mrs. Finkelstein.
I've got to get to my pages. I have
Okay.
it all put away, so.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Dr. Bazzi. Since deciding to become a candidate and participating in the search process, what has reinforced your aspiration to be our next superintendent?
I will say the most impactful thing happened today. I really had the pleasure of meeting with various stakeholder groups. And honestly, I'm not saying this, you can speak to Mr. Silveri after this. I was really impressed with the high school students. They probably asked me some of the most difficult questions, articulated what was important to them and what their priorities were. I think that really solidified the why behind coming to apply in West Bloomfield. I will tell you that I love Ferndale. It's a wonderful community with wonderful people. The mission and vision really do align. To Ferndale, I see a lot of similarities. I think, though, like I said in the first round, I really just would have regretted not going after this opportunity. And often in life, we regret the things we don't do rather than the things that we do.
Thank you.
Dr. Bazzi,
Good evening.
a healthy relationship between the board and the superintendent directly correlates to the effectiveness of both and positively impacts the entire district. What would you do to foster this relationship, and what would your expectations for us be?
It's a great question, because ultimately the district's well-being and success ultimately lies with myself as a superintendent and with the Board of Education. And it's a responsibility that I don't think anyone takes lightly who sits in your chair or sits in my chair. I think what's important is to have a common vision as a group, but it's also very important to get to know each board member individually. As much as we know that you're a governance body of 7, and ultimately the power and leadership lies with the board as a whole rather than individually, it's still really important to get to know each board member and what their priorities are and their thoughts and ideas. So building that relationship one-on-one, I think, is really, really important, but collectively building it as then hopefully an 8-team governance team is equally important. I think we have to be committed to board policy and board governance. If you have operating procedures as a board, that we adhere to those. I think continuous education is really important. Being a part of MASB, having ongoing professional development with the board in terms of governance, professional development as it relates to diversity, equity, inclusion. We have to commit ourselves to learning as leaders and really take on the role of lead learners, both at a board level and at the superintendent level. I think it's really important to always keep the lines of communication open. My responsibility to you is that there's no surprises, and the same thing, that you're responsible to me, hopefully, that there's no surprises. I think if we're explicit with where we want to head in terms of what we want to accomplish, and there's no confusion about that, we'll be successful. So if I'm clear with you and you're clear with me, that will be there. I will tell you, I'm very honest and very, I am very passionate about education, very passionate. And I believe in always doing what's best for students. So ultimately, I'll share those positions with the board, but ultimately when we make a decision and we walk out the door, we walk out as a team, and we move forward as a team. So I think understanding that individually we all have our own sets of beliefs and purpose, that ultimately it's our job to come together when we're making decisions and move forward as a team.
All right, Dr. Bazzi.
Good evening.
What alternatives to suspension and expulsion have you implemented to ensure academic success for students with recurring behavioral issues?
So we are heavily, each of our buildings has a restorative practice coach, and we have a district coordinator for restorative practices. He's one of our high school principals, but also serves in that role. We currently have a restorative practice handbook that really details out what we do in terms of consequences. Our goal is obviously for students not to be out of the building for suspension, but there are times, unfortunately, where that is the appropriate consequence, right? If there's a safety issue or it's unsafe for a particular student to be in a building, then those things, still are dealt with per our student code of conduct. Alternatives, I think people feel that punishment and consequence are the same thing. So sometimes a consequence is that a student needs to spend some time with me when they've made a poor choice. And trust me, they would rather go home than spend an hour in my office with me discussing. So we take a restorative approach with those things. We want students to understand why they made a certain decision and how that decision impacted the people impacted. So the person that they harmed, how do they think they felt? I want students to really reflect what they've thought of since making a decision that they made. So one thing that we try to do, and again, this is if all parties are interested, is to hold a restorative practice circle, which includes the person who caused the harm and the person who received the harm, to hopefully restore that relationship, because we find that when we've restored the relationship, people really do understand the wrong that they've done, they're sorry about it, and they've repaired that relationship and we move forward. We've seen with suspensions, if we suspend a student, what do we always say? Oh, it's a repeat offender. Okay, so we keep applying the same punishment and get the same result. You're right, that's exactly what's going to happen. Now again, there has to be respect for staff, and we have to ensure that there's a safe environment. So as I said, people misconstrue that sometimes to say, well, that means there's no suspensions ever. No, there are, because that's the appropriate consequence. So in terms of alternatives, it could be you have to spend an hour after school with the principal in the office. It could be that it's a parent meeting. So sometimes I won't send the student home, or the principal won't send them home, but we require a parent meeting to have a discussion about what took place. Or a letter is written to a teacher to apologize for language. I give you one example. I was walking in the high school, and a student ran past me and honestly nearly knocked me over. And I was walking with one of the assistant principals, and he immediately wanted to chase down the student and say, "What were you doing?" And I said, no, you're mad and I'm mad, because I almost, I was just knocked over. So I don't want to react when I'm upset. I saw that the student ran into the gym. So I waited. I waited about 20 minutes until I calmed down, okay? And I went into the gym, and it was basketball practice after school. And I saw the coach, and I said, "Hey, coach." And he's like, "Hey, Dr. Bazzi." And I said, "Hey." And the student knew immediately, oh. Now, granted, it was a Friday. I was probably wearing Ferndale gear, and who is she? So no big deal. And right away, I could just see instant regret. So the student's like, "Well, am I in trouble?" I said, "Well, let me ask you, how do you think it made me feel to be knocked over?" He's like, "Well, not good." I said, and I left out a certain part. When we said, "Hey, slow down," the student also shared some choice words in the hallway. And so I told the student, how could that have been dealt with differently? And the student's like, "Well, I was going to be late to practice. I was going to get in trouble from the coach, and I was just in a rush." We had a really nice conversation where he really thought about how his actions impacted me and made me feel, and how he could have dealt with the situation differently. Now every time I see that student in the hallway, it's a fist bump, it's a smile, it's a connection. Say I would have said, "Okay, you can't go to practice," or "You're suspended." I would have never been able to have a relationship with that student. They would always see me as the person. And sometimes, again, some people disagreed with me. They said, "Well, the student disrespected you." I'm the adult. I have thicker skin than that. And this is a student who I gave the opportunity to be reflective. They were. There's no more issues. So again, we can't take things personally with kids. Ultimately, they're kids. We're here to guide them and help them. But I will say, there is times when suspensions are necessary.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. Dr. Bazzi, management systems are essential for the effective and efficient operation of a school district. Please share your experience as a superintendent with implementing systems that have positively impacted your district.
Can you clarify the systems you're looking at? Are you looking from a curriculum aspect, a facilities aspect,
Correct.
budget? I'm sorry?
Curriculum.
Curriculum, okay.
Yes. And thank you for asking that. So if you want to go with the tentacles, you can.
No, it's all right. I approve. We'll stick with curriculum. So I'm not going to go into the SEL curriculum. I've been very clear on how we've implemented that K-12, and it's worked very well. The next thing I'll speak to is culturally responsive teaching practices. We've done professional development with work around Zaretta Hammond and implementing CRT, which is interpreted, it stands for two different acronyms, but culturally responsive teaching is what I'm referring to right now. And implementing those strategies within the classroom, again, at the K-12 level. Again, those are skills to achieve content. So one thing that we've done through that process is we've created equity audits of classrooms so that when we go into a classroom, we're looking for things that represent culturally responsive practices within the classroom. So the DEI PD and the equity work is really all-encompassing. That hits from central office all the way down to pre-K. So again, we've reevaluated our hiring protocols and things at that level from a central office standpoint. We've looked at how we're teaching historical events, right? Say Columbus Day, and how that's being taught, and is that really accurate history? So again, we're really taking a deep dive into the curriculum and adjusting that curriculum to match those accurate histories. So again, CRT practices at the K-12 level is something that we've implemented with fidelity and really have had great success. We've seen the opportunity or achievement gap reduced due to that work. We see that, again, we're teaching and learning and making sure that our students are being able to see themselves in the school environment as it makes it a more personal experience for our students. So again, I would go back to the SEL implementation, which was really, it was really a large undertaking to do K-12. Yeah.
Thank you.
My turn now.
Good evening.
Hi. In regard to your management style, how do you determine the appropriate level of involvement and oversight with staff members, being appropriately engaged without inserting yourself too far into their day-to-day responsibilities?
It's really, I think being collaborative in style is very important in decision-making process. I rarely make a decision in isolation, not because I'm not confident in my ability to make those decisions. It's because we always want multiple perspectives when making certain decisions. Obviously, there are times where split-second decisions need to be made, and certainly we've made those in Ferndale when we need to. I think the balance becomes, are you there to do the person's job because you think you can do it better? Or are you there to help them think about the intricacies of their implementation and help them work through that process as a thought partner? Are you a thought partner, or are you just telling them what to do? I see myself as a thought partner. I will say it is important, though, that if I oversee principals or central office, ultimately I'm responsible for executing the strategic plan along with them, right? And I have to provide oversight, coaching, mentoring for those things to happen. But for a superintendent, this is how we kind of measure it. I do is minimally effective. So if I come to the board and I say, I did this, I did that, I'm minimally effective at best. If I say we did this, I'm effective at my job. If I say they did, then I'm highly effective. So we have to empower our staff to do the job that we know they're capable of doing. We hired them to do that job. Many times superintendents in general, right, will tell boards that, like, stay in your lane, right, because you hired me to do the job. So if we get to that point, my staff in Ferndale is very open. I work with an incredible group of educators and central office staff that are really top-notch. And if I start to get out of the lane, they'll softly remind me, like, don't worry, I got this. But I think, again, they know that there's always positive intent. I'm there to help them and let them know that they're not in this journey alone, and I'm here to support them in any way I can.
Again. Please describe your process to build the district budget. Specifically, how do you work with the CFO, cabinet, and others to develop, monitor, and adjust the budget throughout the year?
So The budget in Michigan is really on a odd timeline, right? So we start to hear revenue sharing information from the state in February, January, and we have to pass a budget by June 30th for a school year that really hasn't gotten started, nor do we have an actual budget or an actual enrollment, right? Enrollment, we don't know enrollment till well into October. So we have to really do our due diligence to do the research. So, for example, if the CFO is looking, or pupil accounting is looking to kind of estimate how much our count's going to be, we really need to look at robust enrollment studies. We use Fred Ignatovich out of Michigan State University, who does extensive enrollment studies, so that we know we're going to be close, right? So from the big picture, we have to look at those numbers to make sure that there's not a large variance, because that really is difficult. If you predict 200 more students than come in, you're really starting the year at a disadvantage. I'm not referencing anything. So, at that, I'm just saying enrollment to me is really, we really have to, I tend to be a little bit on the conservative side when it comes to budget, and I'll admit that. But the budget process for us in Ferndale is very in-depth. So for example, we start looking at the budget, to be honest, right around January, and we meet with every principal, department head, central office staff to take a look at their current year budget. Where do you feel that it's supporting you? Where do you think that there's gaps? And we have, myself and the assistant sup of finance, have those meetings one-on-one with every single person who manages a budget. Oftentimes, they say, yep, we feel good, we feel supported. At times, they say, we see some gaps, and what can we do to address these? It makes it difficult because, again, in years past, maybe people just rolled over the budget, and then it's easy. Now people are like, they have proposals, right? They're laminated, they're ready to go. They have their why, and that's good. We want them to dream big and come with those ideas, because somehow we're going to find a way. So it's important to involve your community, your community of staff, and let them have a voice in their budget. So the thing is, though, from the big picture, you really have to go back to your strategic plan. If you commit to PD or certain STEM education, you have to make sure that's represented in your budget. That's a non-negotiable, right? Our strategic plan says these are the action items that we're going to achieve. We have to make sure that's integrated, and that's why you have to work with the CFO to make sure that those are embedded in, especially if it might be something that, teaching and learning, and we need to bring in the curriculum department to say, these are the things that we need highlighted in the budget because it aligns to the strategic plan. So we do that, and we put in assumptions that in the budget when we're building it that we believe are based on data and research based. So when we talk about enrollment, when we talk about per pupil increase, these are based on the information that we have at the time. Again, I tend to take a little bit of a conservative approach because I don't want to see a swing that then impacts the classroom. It's really important that we protect our instructional investment in the classroom. So as we build that out, we then obviously, we have a timeline that gets shared with the Board of Education that explicitly states that this is when we're meeting with department heads, this is when we'll meet with the committee of the whole of the board to say, kind of, here's our rough draft of the budget. Where's your input? Take a look at it. And we give the board time to really take a look at that. And then when we bring the budget to them in June, everyone has seen it multiple times. Everybody understands where are the changes being made. Everybody sees this cost is being implemented because, again, it's one of the action items of the strategic plan. So we have those discussions with the board where they really see what's going into the budget, especially any changes over previous year, whether it's a textbook adoption, furniture purchase, facilities improvement. We're able to highlight those things. So, we look at, and this came up during the stakeholder groups, we look at things like fund balance. And again, I'll reiterate that we're not a bank, but we do have to have a rainy day fund, because we never want to come to staff or the community and say, we have to make a major cut or major layoffs, or we need everybody to take a 5% reduction. So I know in West Bloomfield, you have well over an 18% fund balance, which is good. I think board want is around 10%. I might say 15%, but tomato, tomato. So I think it's important to have that so that long-term we're sustainable and fiscally responsible.
Thank you. How would you address chronic absenteeism and the negative impact it has on student growth and achievement? What is the most successful strategy you have previously employed?
In terms of absenteeism, we have to remove barriers from students coming to school. So a lot of times, students not coming to school in terms of absenteeism is there's an access, whether it's we need gas, our car is broken down, too far off of a bus stop, or don't meet the requirements for transportation. We really have to work one-on-one with families to see what barriers exist and help them remove those. I think that's probably the most effective, because sometimes there are things outside of the family's control to get their students on time. So we have to be innovative. We have to find ways to support our community who are having issues getting to school on time. The second thing is, what I've noticed with chronic absenteeism is we really got to take a deep dive. One strategy we look at is it's interesting. Dania's absent, first hour, but then she comes to second hour, she goes to third hour, fourth hour, but then she's gone fifth hour and then comes back for sixth period. Why? Right? And there tends to be generally a relationship issue within the classroom, like if we see that there's a gap in the school day of why they're not coming to school. And sometimes the staff member doesn't even really know what's going on, but the student's like, well, you said this one time, and that's it. I'm not coming back to class. So we really take a look at the deep dive of why are students coming to certain classes and never missing them, and then why are certain students missing classes at particular times. Obviously, one of the aspects, again, for us in Ferndale, we have over 63% who are economically disadvantaged. It tends to be mostly an access issue. So if we have to send a cab or find a way or a gas card, we're providing that to our students. So again, it's those personal relationships where there's trust and understanding. We have to make students want to be here, right? We have to be engaged in the classroom. I know with my favorite classes, I didn't want to miss it. So we have to work at looking at what's taking place in the classroom and making sure we're having those one-on-one conversations. I know there's a lot of kids, but again, sending out, I don't think it's sending out a phone call that says your kid missed fifth period, or sending out a letter that says you have 20 absences. That is not going to change the trajectory in terms of reducing chronic absenteeism. We have to speak to families and understand why this is occurring, and then help them deal with those to create individualized solutions.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hi again.
Hello.
Effective and timely communication is vital to the success of a school district. Please describe the type of communication students, staff, parents, the community, and the board should expect to receive from you.
So I think communication can, thank you so much. No, yeah. So I think in terms of communication, it's multifaceted, right? Communication isn't just one thing. The first thing that I would love to do is, again, send out a weekly newsletter that goes out to the community that includes some highlights of great things that are taking place in the district, as well as a Friday message from myself that just, it could be related to current events of the world, it could be related to teaching and learning, it could be related to our fine arts program, something that connects the community, right? I think that communication is important. Now, depending on what your social media of choice is in West Bloomfield, I think it's also, as much as social media can be really daunting and really, difficult, it's really an important way to engage. So in Ferndale, Facebook is really big. people use it. We have like 4,000 followers on our Facebook page. I know, we've been building it up. And that's our main way to communicate. That's how we highlight great things. That's how we get information out. I myself engage the community on Facebook. It can get a lot sometimes because I start to get complaints or this happened. And again, I kindly direct them to the right person. Like, hey, I understand your concern. Please reach out to the building principal. So I think engaging people on social media is inevitable. I mean, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, those are reality of where we're at, and we have to engage the community in those means. You know, with staff, every Monday I send out a Monday morning message to staff and include our See, Think, Wonder, as well as any pertinent information. I will tell you, I do communicate the good, the bad, the ugly. We have to be transparent with our stakeholders that when things happen, we acknowledge that sometimes things happen that are outside of our control, but we have to clearly communicate those things to the board as well as the community. With the board, I would send you a Friday update that would probably have too much information, but it's better to have more information than not enough. So every Friday, I haven't missed one in many years. Maybe once or twice it's come on a Saturday, but that's the latest that it'll come. And you'll have an update for the entire week. It'll basically tell you everything I did in the week, not because I think you want to micromanage me, but these are the things that are taking place on a day-to-day process within the district. So with community, that communication also with staff can be face-to-face. Personal connections are best done in person, and that communication and dialogue needs to happen ongoing and continuously. So there's a lot of different avenues to provide that communication. I think it's always that we're authentic, we're honest, we're transparent with the community. Even when it's a difficult situation, we have to just say, this happened, this is how we're going to address it, and we're going to move forward.
Thank you. Just so there's no weird silence, we're both going to take a drink, and then
Thank you.
anybody else feel free to join in. Back to business. Dr. Bazzi, how do you engage bargaining unit presidents in decision-making, especially as it relates to strategic planning, staffing, and feedback from employees?
Doesn't the CFO negotiate contracts? No, I'm kidding. So, I'm certain that they do, and I trust them to do so. But I think that ongoing and open dialogue with union leadership is really important. Obviously, collective bargaining agreements are mutually beneficial to the district and to the bargaining units because they include things that are important to the district and it includes things that are important to the union. I think good faith, interest-based bargaining is the way to go. The budget is pretty, like I said, when we go through a process, it's so transparent that everyone knows what we're working with. Obviously, we discussed that school budgets are very restricted in terms of how we can use them, but we have to be creative. So I think having an open and honest dialogue, sharing the numbers, making sure that it's explicitly clear kind of where we're at in terms of our budget is really important. Again, I meet with our union president. We meet for lunch like every 3 to 4 months. And most of the time, it's really not even to discuss district business. It's to discuss our kids, how things are going, how we're feeling, and then sometimes things come up. Obviously, sometimes because our director of HR is wonderful, right? But not an educator. There are times where I get pulled in, or even the assistant superintendent of curriculum gets pulled in to try and resolve maybe a misunderstanding or something. So again, we work as a team, and many times I'll get pulled in, not because, again, I want to or I want to micromanage. It's like, no, hey, Dania, it's kind of like you're the middle person. We want your thoughts on this particular issue and give us our thoughts. So I think having a good relationship is important. It doesn't help anyone to have not a strong relationship between union leadership with all your bargaining groups, and making sure that the collective bargaining agreement, right, again, like you brought up, is tied to your strategic plan. So if the strategic plan says, our goal is to have lower class sizes, and then I'm not even discussing that during negotiations, right, then there's a misalignment there. So it should help guide some of our discussions as we do that. But again, I think the collective bargaining agreements help us understand what our expectations are, what our work conditions are, and it clears up any gray area in terms of, execution of that within the district.
Thanks.
All right, next question is me.
Thank you.
So my question is centered around culturally responsive teaching. And we've heard a lot from you so far in the last question that I asked. So I'm going to adjust this one just a little bit to just capture a little more. Please share your perspective on culturally responsive teaching, citing your views on its relevance and importance for all students, particularly minority students, unrepresented students, disadvantaged students, economically disadvantaged students, and our most challenged learners.
I think, obviously, I believe in culturally responsive teaching practices. It's important that we have those strategies and systems in place for students to become, to be able to accomplish their goals that they have set forth. It also allows us to remove any, bias that is in the classroom in terms of implicit bias or really just outwardly, overtly bias that we tend to see sometimes in the classroom. I think, for our subgroups of students, including, by race or economically disadvantaged or special populations, I think sometimes they are not represented in the classrooms that they see. So for example, it's easy for us to say in a classroom, right, boys and girls, everyone get up, right? Whereas many of our students don't identify as boys and girls. It's really being intentional with the language that we use so that we're making sure that all students feel safe, respected, and valued in those classrooms. It's important that we look at history and content and make sure that it's accurate. I mentioned Columbus Day. There's things that, that we know now that we knew then, but again, it wasn't implicitly taught within the classroom. I think it's important that in a classroom, when I think of CRT in terms of culturally responsive teaching, I really see it for our subgroups as high expectations. So Zaretta Hammond talks a lot about being a warm demander, having high expectations for all students. Now we say that, right? But then when we push kids that are in the subgroup, economically disadvantaged, we easily say, well, the gap is because they're economically disadvantaged. That's not high expectations for all students when we say, well, that's why they're not performing on a test, right? So it's important that when we say high expectations for all students, we mean it in our practice. Now, we do agree that students will come to us at different levels, at different experiences, preschool experience, no preschool experience, and we have to meet students where they're at. But over time, the rigor that we have, the rigorous expectations that we have for some students, we have to have it for all students, all.
Thank you.
I'm down here now. Hi. If you become the superintendent of West Bloomfield School District, you'll be leaving Ferndale schools. How would you prepare your district, your staff, and the Ferndale community for the transition to the next chapter in the district's history as your time as their superintendent comes to a close?
I've thought of that quite a bit. I have a lot of relationships and wonderful experiences in Ferndale. What I'm most proud of, though, is that we have systems and processes in place that make the success of Ferndale not dependent on me. So we have a team of educators, a team of administrators, a team of central office staff who are exceptional at what they do, and they will continue the work. We also have a Board of Education that is strong. They have great experience. They have led the district through some of the most difficult times in modern education, and they will continue to do so. The thing is I will ensure, though, I will do everything. Ferndale will not fail at a transition. I will personally make sure that they're successful because the people and the students and the community and the board and the staff are near and dear to my heart. So I won't let them fail. Even if I have to work 24 hours a day leading up to the transition, I will ensure that they have everything they need to make a successful transition. But again, I'm most confident that the systems we've put in place and the processes we've put in place will allow those things to continue with or without me. And really, that's the true testament. As I said, I do, we do, they do. They will be able to do, and they will continue to be successful.
Dr. Bazzi, please share your experience with successfully supporting and engaging reluctant staff members when introducing a large new initiative, such as curriculum, technology, software, or an assessment.
So maybe this is due to our size, but there's always a little bit of skepticism when we do change, right? Because rightfully so, the past 10 years of education has been this silver bullet or this program. And so teachers are like, okay, 1 year you have me do this. And then all of a sudden you switch gears and then you say you do this. And so some people have been teaching 15, 20 years, and there's only so many times that they can restart a process. So part of that is our fault as leaders. I will tell you, to get people who are apprehensive, you have to ensure that teachers are a part of the decision-making process. No curriculum, no technology, no textbook, no program should ever be implemented without teacher input. Because once you have their buy-in, so say you put them on a committee to evaluate a textbook, right? And all of a sudden this textbook is selected, right? And maybe some teachers wanted another one. That tends to happen. I want Wonders, I want Journeys, I want this textbook. When we have teachers involved in the process and they can go back to their building and say, listen, I sat through this committee, I saw the three, this is really the best option they have, that is more credibility than me trying to explain or do a fancy PowerPoint or say this is why, or to have the Teaching and Learning Services Department do the same thing. To get buy-in, you have to have them a part of the process, because I know when I was a teacher, the people who I trusted the most were the teachers standing alongside of me. Those were the people that I interacted with the most. I am a different type of superintendent, but in no disrespect, I loved my superintendent, great guy, but I really had no interaction with the superintendent. As a student or as a teacher, I had zero interaction. That will be different. I do have interactions with staff at all levels, again, not for the purposes of micromanaging or being their boss, but for the purpose of connections and relationships. So I think it's really important that if you're going to involve staff, if you're going to do a new initiative, you have to involve teacher leaders within that process. That's first. Now, how about if they're still naysayers, right? And they still say, no, I don't like this. Again, you have to go with the research. You have to show that this works. Sometimes it's worth it to take the time to pilot it in a small setting, right? So maybe we're not going to do it large scale. We're going to pilot it, and then if people see the success of it, then they say, okay, there's something there. So you know what? Let's implement it with fidelity, because now all students will benefit from it. So sometimes you have to show them how it can be successful. One last strategy I've used is I've went into buildings. So for example, we wanted to start the AVID program at Ferndale Middle School. And AVID is a great course that teaches students academic skills, if you're familiar with it. And some of the teachers thought, well, no, we can do that in Impact Hour. We have the 30 minutes, we can integrate those skills. So I invited them to go to Utica. We went, we observed some classrooms, and we really were able to see it in action. That created buy-in. So I think taking the time to show the investment and to really have them a part of the process is how you're able to. Will you get everyone? Hopefully, but maybe not. But if it's what's best for kids, then we'll try and get as many on the train with us, but if not, we're still going.
Dr. Bazzi, Michigan school districts have been experiencing declining enrollment for quite some time. Please share your experience with right-sizing and/or redistricting. How did you engage all stakeholders, calm student fears, staff fears, and address community concerns?
So I've been very lucky. My 8 years as superintendent, I have not had a deficit. Again, it speaks to my, fiscal responsibility. I will tell you that I came in right after Ferndale made a drastic change. They went from 3 elementaries to 2 elementaries. So they went from a 2 elementary model that had, I believe it was K2 and 3-5, or K3 and 4-6, if I'm correct. And that was 1 unit. And then they had a K6 building. That was another. The K6 building was predominantly white. The building that was K3 and 4-6 was predominantly black. And they really saw that within the 3 buildings, they could probably go to 2 buildings, and it would be K2, 3-5, and then middle school would be 6-8. That was a big decision to go from a 3 elementary district to 2. And they had made that decision again right before I came on in 2017. They did it for equity issues. They did it for fiscal responsibility issues because it was, the district was getting close to, I think, a 6 or 7% fund balance. I can tell you, though, what the board did is they spent many, many evenings and many, many board meetings and many late nights. They heard the community, they listened, they had input groups. They made a decision that was rooted in what was best for the community. It was not a difficult decision. Some people left the district as a result, not as many as people thought, and really it stabilized to where our enrollment now is higher than it was before the decision. So we can't be afraid to make decisions based on what might happen and really be committed to the values that we are doing. I can tell you the board, though, took the time to hear, the district took the time to hear, the previous superintendent did, and really right now, 5 years into the decision, we can see the benefits of it. It's no doubt a difficult decision, but as I said, I have not had to make drastic cuts because I really do take the budgeting process seriously. It's not by chance. It is because it's thoughtful work to put us in the best position moving forward. If I did have to make those hypothetically, again, it would be rooted in what's our commitments and make sure that our budget is aligned to commitment with minimal impact to staff and students.
Thank you.
Dr. Bazzi.
Just a minute, I just want to give a 12-minute warning.
Okay,
Maybe we could make that 13 because I made you take a drink.
that's okay.
All right, so, and you have, I think, 3 questions left, and then whatever you present to the board at the end. What, in your experience, is the most effective way to recruit and retain high-quality teachers and support staff?
I think it's really important to highlight kind of what the mission and vision of the school district is. So if you look at Ferndale's posting, it's very clear of what our commitments are to. People know, like, if you want to come to a district that is committed to academic excellence, social justice, you come to Ferndale. It's right on every posting that we have. And you know what? If it's not for you, it's good. Then you see the posting, you're clear that this isn't the right fit for you, and that's okay too. So I think to retain, you really have to seek people out. You have to recruit. You have to actively engage in job fairs. We held our first on-site job fair at Ferndale, and at first it was met with a little bit of like, we're just going to advertise for a job fair at our high school and have people come. Yes, I was interviewing parapros, lunch aides. We actually hired like 7 people on the spot that day. It was highly successful for positions that were really hard to fill. I think that we have to understand that obviously pay has something to do with recruiting, but it's not, the research is clear. That is not the single most predictor. It's, do you feel valued? Do you feel heard? Do you feel honored? Those things are important. They are motivators for our staff, and it's important that we recruit really skilled staff, diverse staff, to make sure they're meeting the needs of our students. I think, one thing about recruitment and retention, obviously we've discussed a little bit that, public education is, is under attack, right? But again, we need to continue to tell the great stories that are taking place. I'm telling you, after meeting with the stakeholder group of your students, we need to get them on a video, we need to get them out there, and we need everyone to be able to see the great things they're doing here.
Thank you.
Dr. Bazzi, competition to public schools in the form of private schools, choice, charters, and online programs is increasing. How, in your opinion, can we ensure that West Bloomfield schools are routinely seen as the top choice for families within our district boundaries in this competitive marketplace?
So I think it's really important that we invest and continue to invest in our preschool education. I think it's important to get students into our buildings early on. I think that's vital to our success. A lot of times in school districts, say you don't offer tuition-based preschool because we're filled up with Head Start and GSRP. So some families go to another private preschool and they're like, oh, well, this school district is good and my kids already started, and then they move on. So I think investing in preschool and making sure we have opportunities to provide high-quality preschool is really important. And that's certainly one way. Another way is we gotta take our show on the road and go to anyone who will listen. We gotta emphasize learning locally and how important that is. I remember early on in my career at Ferndale, I went to every city council meeting, every neighborhood association, and I presented facts on Ferndale. And I busted a lot of myths that people had about the district and said, here's the data. And then some people with misconceptions about the school district, we cleared those up. So I think it's really important that we get out into the community, let them know all the great things we have, and that there's an importance about being a part of your school community, where you live and going to school. That investment in public education has impact. I think another way to ensure is ensuring that our facilities and technology are really top-notch. When people walk into a building, they want to feel that's where they want to send their 5 or 6-year-olds. So when they walk in, they want to see a learning space that they feel is conducive for learning and best for their children. So there's a lot of things we can do, but we have to create that school family atmosphere where people want to be a part of the community. They want to stay in the community that they live and send their children. There are some cases, though, we know that if somebody's going to send their child to a private school, sometimes there's legacy reasons and others. That's going to happen, and I certainly respect a parent's choice to decide what's best for their student. It doesn't mean we're not going to try and recruit and retain.
Thank you.
Last question. If you are offered this position and accept, how long might we expect you to stay?
I think to me, and I say this sincerely and I mean it, obviously things change, and generally, what do they say? The board that hires you is not the one that, well, you know the rest, so we won't say that. My commitment is this is it. This is hopefully the end of the road for me in terms of establishing the end of my career. I'm really excited about the opportunity. I've seen that you've had a long-standing history of long relationships with great superintendents that you've even named buildings after, which is, pretty neat. I don't want that. I'm just, just mentioning it. But there's been a commitment, and so there's been a commitment at the board level. This board is also, many of you are very long-standing members, and there's a commitment to it. So for me, it depends how long I can go, but as long as you'll have me. Thank you.
Okay, so So how long do I have? 6 minutes. So we would like to take a few minutes now to provide you with an opportunity to ask questions you might have for the board.
You know, one question that came up a number of times in the stakeholder group was discussions about STEAM education. And so a lot of people, you know, from my understanding, it's at the middle school level. I guess my question then to the board is, how do we envision implementing STEAM education, or how has it been, say, at the K-5 level, to where that's integrated into all levels?
That needs a lot more than 5 minutes.
Well, yeah.
I will say we've moved, as a district, we've moved towards project-based learning and more STEAM all across from actually preschool on up. We have one school that's a designated STEAM school, which is Roosevelt, and that is a predominantly school of choice entry point that had testing, and it's criteria based. So that there's different questions that usually come up regarding STEAM. I'm not saying it clearly because it's such a big, it encompasses a whole lot here, but I don't know if that question was based on schools of choice and then criteria-based to get into the STEAM program, or criteria-based school of choice at the high school to get into our STEAM pathways. So that could be the question, but we're committed to project-based learning and moving forward with technology and STEAM throughout the district. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Honestly, last time you answered the questions that I had, my questions just came based off some of the feedback I've had, and so I don't have any others.
Good. Would you like to make any closing remarks?
Yeah, I'll just, just say a few words. I really enjoyed the community groups. I want to thank the Board of Education for setting that up and arranging that. I'd like to thank Kendra for staying with me all day and ensuring that I had snacks and water. Really, the stakeholder groups were phenomenal. You have a wonderful staff, wonderful student body, wonderful administrators. They really made me feel welcomed and provided a little bit of humor throughout the day as well. So I was really appreciative. So I thank everyone for their kindness and time. There's no doubt that we've had a difficult past 2 years, but I assure everyone we will rebound. At the state and federal level, which we're seeing a commitment to public education from our governor, and I think that it's just a matter of time for the tide to turn. The bottom line is there's no more noble profession than being an educator. Our students deserve our commitment to them. Our staff deserve our commitment to them. And there's no other profession that really has such a collective impact on society than public education. I've always felt a special summon to service being a public educator. I'm eager to work alongside of you, the staff, the board, the community, who have also answered that same summon to service. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you. So, Dr. Bazzi, we sincerely appreciate your time and continued interest in being the next superintendent of West Bloomfield School District. We will continue to keep you apprised throughout the rest of our decision-making process and expect to be prepared to make our final determination on Monday, March 21st at our monthly business meeting. We want to thank you for being here again today and spending all this time and getting to know our stakeholders, some of them. And I'd also like to thank our stakeholders that took the time today to come out and meet with you and ask questions. So I think we have a committed community, and we appreciate all the time that you've spent with us and look forward to our visit with you and your staff and board and community at Ferndale Schools next week.
We'll be waiting for you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, is there any public comments today? There was no public comments. So at this point, we will adjourn our meeting. It's 8:26. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I know, I didn't have that in my notes. Thank you, Dr. Bazzi, too.
Thank you.
We just want to quickly review next steps, just to make sure we're all on the same page. So next week is the site visit, and I believe you all received the schedule that Dr. Bazzi had submitted, correct? So you understand what that's going to look like, and then 3 board members who will be participating will be following up with a written summary for the rest of the board, so that you'll all be up to speed. And then you have moved the decision up to the 21st, a week from this Monday. So I can't be present on that evening, unfortunately, regrettably, but you're certainly up to this. So just to review, you can handle it just as you would if I were here as well. And I advise that you follow the same routine that you have been, that each one of you individually says, really, you've got 2 choices, and I want to be clear on that, and I made that clear to your stakeholder groups today, too. You're down to 1 candidate, but that doesn't mean that you've made a decision yet. The 2 choices you have are you decide that Dr. Bazzi is the right person to be the next superintendent of West Bloomfield Schools, or you decide that you really need to continue the search, right? So you have a choice still to make based on all the data that you will have collected by then, starting with the initial application materials, interviews, stakeholder feedback, et cetera. You've gotten a lot of good information, I think, to help you along the way. So each one of you should weigh in and say, I recommend that we hire Dr. Bazzi as our next superintendent, or I recommend that we continue the search. Those are your 2 options. So I would presume that consensus would become very evident once you go down the line, and all 7 of you have had a chance to weigh in. When that's clear, somebody would just need to make a motion that would reflect that consensus. It needs to be seconded. Of course, there could be further discussion, and then you would vote. And whatever you choose to do, if you choose to hire Dr. Bazzi at that point, what we routinely normally do is I would invite the board president to kind of stop the meeting and make the phone call on the spot. Dr. Bazzi, being a current superintendent, unfortunately has a board meeting of her own already on Monday. So she will be unavailable at the time that you would be making that call. So my advice is to have President Brickman even just send her a text indicating that you'd like her to call you as soon as she's available, and she'll know that too.
Okay.
And then you could share that news with her. If you were to decide that you need to continue the search, you're going to need to invite me back, and we're going to need to have some discussion about what that might look like and where we go from there. Okay? So do you have any questions at all about what's left?
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Fabulous guide on our mission to find our next superintendent. So thank you for that. Thank you. Now I can adjourn. Thank you. Everyone have a good evening. And thanks everybody for their feedback.
Oh, thank you.